Hi.
Hello again. Genesis chapter 25. Abraham has just breathed his last and died in a good old age. So we're starting at 25 verse 11.
Yeah.
After the death of Abraham, God blessed Isaac, his son, and Isaac settled at Beer-lahai-roi. These are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's servant, bore to Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael, named in the order of their birth: Nebaioth, the firstborn of Ishmael, and Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadad, Tema, Jeter, Naphish, and Kedemah. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names, by their villages, by their encampments, 12 princes according to their tribes. These are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. He breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people. They settled from Havilah to Shur, which is opposite Egypt in the direction of Assyria. He settled over against all his kinsmen. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramean, to be his wife.
Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife, because she was barren. And the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah his wife conceived. But the children struggled together within her, and she said, "If all is well, why am I like this?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb. 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. One people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over. So they called his name Esau. Afterward his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field. But Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau, because he ate of his game. But Rebekah loved Jacob. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please, feed me with the same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright, as of this day." And Esau said, "Look, I am about to die, so what is this birthright to me?" Then Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him, and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils, and then he ate and drank, arose, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright.
So the beginning of the chosen people. Not very auspicious, is it?
No.
A technicality that I think we should note is there's 2 mentions of these are the generations of here. We mentioned, I think, in the previous segment about the divisions of the book of Genesis, the toledoths, and that's the Hebrew meaning of the Hebrew word for the meaning, these are the generations of. So you have the generations of Ishmael in verse 12, and then right after, really, verse 19, these are the generations of Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the 7th and 8th toledoth, or divisions, in the book of Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
You might read right past it, but if that's the structure of the book, then we need to pay pretty close attention to it, because you notice here again, the first generation that's mentioned is the line outside the promise.
Yeah.
And then we go to the promised child Isaac.
But Ishmael does receive blessings.
Mm-hmm.
And it was prophesied 12 princes would come from him, and here you have that outlined. that he does get a physical blessing, even though he's not getting the promise.
Yeah. To the third generation here, Abraham's grandchildren, right?
Mm-hmm.
So God is still honoring his promises to bless Abraham and his offspring, even though they're outside of the spiritual line.
Yeah. I mean, the promise was that he'd be a great nation and have a great name, and all families would be blessed. Well, that's all kind of being fulfilled through the fact that he has many children besides Isaac.
And he was later told that he would have many nations coming from his loins.
Mm-hmm.
Great nations, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I noticed this thing about Rachel inquiring.
Rebekah?
Rebekah, yeah. Sorry. Rebekah inquiring about the turmoil that she's feeling during her pregnancy. So it says she inquires of the Lord. And she does get a revelation from the Lord. And he tells her the future of these children. And the last line about the older will serve the younger. So she's, later on, you see she's remembering that. But she, like Abraham, tries to work it out herself.
Yeah.
So she's maybe told Jacob, because Jacob seems to be well aware, too, that there's something afoot and he wants to get the birthright.
Yeah. So, this tendency to take the matter, even the divine promises, in your own hands.
Because to me, that's a signal that you don't think God can do it on his own, that he can accomplish it. But it does seem to be a human tendency to try and work it out yourself.
And we've already seen the bad implications from that tendency in the Ishmael story back in 16.
Yeah.
That is that God is, in effect, saying this one will be in your face forever. And there we have the birth of the Arab people still in the land, still in the face of the children of Isaac and Jacob. Yeah.
Yeah, I just read somewhere, and I just liked the phrase, God knows your tomorrows. You know, that this should give us confidence and assurance and trust, faith in God, that he will accomplish his will. But somehow we take those assurances and then try and figure out ways in which we can do them. We can accomplish them. It
seems to be built into Jacob's name too. He's his birth, his name has something to do with this supplanting, this grabbing of Esau's heel. So commentators tend to make that have to do with the birth of the chosen people, has to do with one brother deliberately cheating the other out of his birthright.
Yeah, I think one of the...
Despite the fact, as you said, it's still been prophesied by God that this will happen, but doesn't mean God approves it.
Yeah, it doesn't... I think one of the commentaries talks about the name. It doesn't necessarily have a negative thing. He's given it a negative connotation by his actions, right? Before
we get to Barnhouse there, he's got a couple of interesting things to say. I just want to comment on what verse 23 demonstrates about Yahweh. Yahweh said to her, and then he foretells the future. So what is that saying about the attributes of God? Well, one, that he's providentially in control.
Yeah.
And he knows the destiny of these two nations coming from.
He knows the future, yeah.
And that goes to his attributes that when you're a witness, you actually effectively deny. You kind of believe in his omnipotence, the three omnis. Of the three omnis, the one you stress is he's all-powerful, almighty. But the other two you don't think much about. One is, of course, his omniscience. How does he know the future so infallibly?
Yeah.
You think he chooses to know what he wants to know about the future, but
you also don't really want him to have that control over the future, because you have him reacting to you. So you've kind of bought into what Rebekah is doing here too, as a witness. You kind of think he's gonna do things for me if I do this and do that. So he's always reacting to your faithfulness, rather than just it's his grace.
So in
not
effect,
your abilities. So
what happens in effect is God's omniscience, and even his omnipotence are sacrificed
for your
to
will.
your freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
your
you
free
become
will.
sovereign.
Yeah. Now, Paul flatly denies that, of course, in the famous passage in Romans 9 where he quotes this very prophecy about the one being stronger than the other, the older will but serving the younger. Who are you to speak back to God, is Paul's point, right? Well, even if God chooses one over the other, you still, if you really believe in his sovereignty, have to bow to that sovereignty.
Yeah.
But he knows the tendencies of these two boys and their offspring. So this is not unjust of God. It's not favoritism, although it looks like favoritism is built into the royal family here, right? In verse 28, Isaac loved Esau because he gave him meat, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
Yeah.
So when there's favoritism in the family, and of course it's more famously in the family later, in the story of Joseph, but when there's favoritism from the very beginning, you realize this is a dysfunctional chosen people.
Yeah. And where their parents make it obvious who they favor.
Yeah.
That's not good parenting.
You got Barnhouse and Kidner, is it?
Two places in Barnhouse. When he's talking about the generations of Ishmael, he says, "We believe that God took the trouble to record the names of the 12 sons of Ishmael because they were the grandsons of Abraham. They were to be blessed because God had so promised Abraham." And then, this is when he's talking about overall subjects of grace and justice. He says, George Eliot wrote of that inexorable law of human souls, that we are preparing ourselves for sudden deeds by the reiterated choice of good or evil that gradually determines character. There is a deliberateness about this narrative that shows the nature of Esau's being. And he sware, and he sold, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thomas Carlyle wrote of Esau, quote, "He is the kind of man of whom we are in the habit of charitably saying that he is nobody's enemy but his own. But in truth he is God's enemy, because he wastes the splendid manhood which God has given him. Passionate, impatient, impulsive, incapable of looking before him, refusing to estimate the worth of anything which does not immediately appeal to his senses, preferring the animal to the spiritual, he is rightly called a profane person. Alas, while the body is so broad and brawny, must the soul lie blinded, dwarfed, stupefied, almost annihilated?" And that's the end of that quote. And then he says, "Lord, shock us away from dragging."
So Esau really represents most of us.
Yeah.
Mankind, who puts faith in his senses and prioritizes his sensual pleasures. Yeah.
And looks too much at the now.
Yeah.
You know, if it's not going to benefit me right now, well, I can forego it. Not thinking of the future. Oh, I had one more I was going to read from Kidner as well.
Well, you're on that, though. That question just echoes down the ages, doesn't it? What is a birthright to me? What do I care?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the talk of an adolescent.
Yeah.
Okay. Jacob, an existing name found elsewhere, means, "May he be at the heels. May God be your rear guard." But it also lends itself to a hostile sense of dogging another's steps or overreaching, as Esau bitterly observed in 27:36. Through his own action, Jacob devalued the name into a synonym for treachery. It is taking up in the Hebrew of Jeremiah 9:4. Every brother will utterly supplant, but the tenacity which was his bane secured blessing in the end.
And then Morgan comments on what comes out of this story in terms of both of the characters, that is Esau and Jacob. He says in the story of the birthright, neither Esau nor Jacob is to be admired. The one was profane in that he allowed the lower side of his nature to master him and sold his birthright in order to appease his physical hunger. The other was mean in that he took advantage of that hunger to obtain the birthright. Yeah, not an auspicious start. And here's Maclaren. Many scoffs have been directed against this story as if it were unworthy of credence that eating a dish of lentils should have shaped the life of a man and his descendants. But is it not always the case that trifles turn out to be determining points? Hinges are very small compared with the doors which move on them. Most lives are molded by insignificant events. No temptation is small, for no sin is small. And if the occasion of yielding to sense and the present is insignificant, the yielding is not so.
Yeah.
So I'm reminded of what Christ said in Luke, that he that is faithful in what is little is faithful also in much. And
There
this is a
are
birthright.
repercussions,
This is not nothing. This is the family birthright. Yeah. What are our links?
We're linking to a video called 6 Attributes of the True God versus the Cult's Gods. God is spirit, personal, free, and the 3 omnis. You have to explain what 3 omnis are.
So God is free. Do we ever think of that?
Yeah.
God is the only one who is free. When we talk about free will, we think about ourselves, don't we? So sovereign means he's the one who is really free, absolutely.
And the 3 omnis?
The 3 omnis, well, we've just said that the one we focus on as witnesses is omnipotence, but we really don't believe that this God is omniscient and omnipresent. In fact, the Watchtower has officially denied that, that he is omnipresent.
Good.
And the playlist. We're going to put the Genesis playlist on, right?
Right.
See you soon.